There was little order throughout much of the first presidential debate between President Trump and Vice President Biden. It descended into chaos as the president and the former Veep exchanged attacks over 6 topics, including the open Supreme Court seat and the coronavirus pandemic. But of course, the moment everyone is talking about today is when President Trump refused to condemn white supremacists.
What are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. Do you want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
who would you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud Boys. Stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem.
All right, Jonathan Greenblatt is the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, and he joins us now. Jonathan, I was following your Twitter feed last night, and as soon as I saw you take to Twitter and say to your audience that the President of the United States owes America an apology or an explanation for his refusal to condemn white supremacists last night, I wanted to talk to you. Explain to our viewers why you should apologize.
Well, Vlad, thank you for the question. I mean, what we saw last night was really historic for all the wrong reasons. In 240 plus years, I don't know if we've ever had a president ask such a clear and obvious question: will you condemn white supremacy? And forgetting the fact that he responded the way he did after the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, where he described there being, quote, good people on both sides. Last night, when given what was nothing short of a layup, I'm trying to still sort through whether we found out the president didn't just miss the layup, he's playing for the other team. The idea that the president can't swiftly and simply condemn a group like the Proud Boys, a hate organization that traffics in anti-Semitism, misogyny, xenophobia, anti-Muslim bias, instead of giving an answer, it was more like an admission, suggesting they should step back and stand by. What does that mean, if not a kind of call to arms to tell this group? And just so we all understand, this is a group that we would describe at the ADL as alt-right. They have known ties to white supremacist organizations. They operate like a gang. They've been involved in violence in the streets. Literally, this past weekend, they organized events in Portland, Oregon, which has been the scene of so much unrest for the last several months, as well as in Washington, D.C. I mean, their anti-immigrant rhetoric should literally scare those of us who believe that America is a pluralistic democracy, because that's not what this group wants. So why the president, again, when given an opportunity on a silver platter to shut this down, actually left open the door? I think it's pretty stunning.
And I think it's important to sort of clarify, too, when you talk about white supremacy groups, we're not talking about, groups fighting for freedom of speech or another sort of political slant. The FBI director, Christopher Wray, said on record that white supremacy groups are racially motivated terrorists. I want to just take a listen to what he had to say.
And I think the thing that we're all struggling with is, there are these homegrown terrorists of every flavor and type, but just in the number of either cases or arrests, how many of them are white supremacist? What is if not the exact number? Is it the same as other types of domestic terrorism? Is it higher? Just give us a level of approximate numbers.
Well, what I can tell you is that within the domestic terrorism bucket, category as a whole, racially motivated violent extremism is, I think, the biggest bucket within that larger group. And within the racially motivated violent extremist bucket, people ascribing to some kind of white supremacist type ideology is certainly the biggest chunk of that.
Okay,
I don't
that's
have
very
numbers
helpful.
for you.
That's very helpful.
Yeah.
You know, and just looking at the president's performance, specifically when the moderator asked him outright to, you know, whatever, disavow white supremacy groups, he kind of said, well, what do you want to call them? What do you want to call them? And repeatedly, the moderator says white supremacy. And then Joe Biden brings up the Proud Boys. And instead of saying white supremacy, he takes the Proud Boys and then very, very quickly pivots to, but something's got to be done about Antifa. Can you just talk a little bit about Antifa? You know, Christopher Wray did not bring up Antifa as a domestic terrorist group. It's a very different point of view from his own FBI.
Yeah, so I mean, at the ADL, we've been tracking extremist movements literally for generations. And I can tell you this, violent right-wing extremists have been involved just over the last decade in 76% of the extremist-related murders we've tracked here in the United States. Antifa and these left-wing radical groups, I'm not saying they're not a problem, but they're simply not even comparable. They're not even in the same league. The Proud Boys are but one example, and there are many others. But they would have been an easy, obvious one. You know, they call themselves a pro-Western fraternity. Again, they are anti-immigrant, xenophobic, and hateful. And last night, immediately, Anne-Marie, immediately after the president made his comment, or if you will, his admission, across the internet, on their social media services, the Proud Boys were cheering. Now, you can't find them on Facebook or Twitter because they've been banned from those services, in part because of the work of the ADL. But I will tell you this, when they stood up on services like Parler and Discord, and one of their leaders, he said, quote, "That's my president standing by, sir." Last night wasn't just a debacle. It was a defining moment. The kind of clarity I don't think any of us wanted to see. To suggest that these people should be standing by is altogether frightening. And I think it requires all of us, elected leaders, public figures, ordinary citizens, to say loud and clear today and every day that prejudice has no place in our politics. And it's not partisan, it's principled to push back and reject those who would bring extremism and hate into the conversation. They simply have no place in our civil discourse, and they don't belong in our political system. Period, full stop.
Jonathan, the Anti-Defamation League has some numbers that I want to share with our viewers. 2,107 anti-Semitic attacks recorded in the United States in 2019, including, of course, that deadly attack at the California synagogue and the New Jersey kosher grocery store. That's a 12% rise from 2018. You have to go back to 1994 to see numbers similar to what we've seen in just the last year and over the course of the last several years. What do you attribute that to? I mean, you know, there are historical antecedents here, and I know that, you know, it's hard to wrap up the president's comments and his refusal to disavow white supremacy and to give that name drop to the Proud Boys to stand by. But even when the president talks about his supporters going to the polls to watch over the voting, again, very ugly historical antecedents to that kind of behavior. What do you attribute that to?
Look, it is really without precedent in this country. I mean, as you pointed out, Vlad, 2019, those numbers, 2,100 plus anti-Semitic incidents, that's the highest number that the ADL has ever seen in 40 plus years of tracking this data. So there was the incident in Poway, California, you mentioned. There was the shooting at a synagogue in Jersey City, a stabbing in Muncie, New York, assaults on a daily basis in Brooklyn. And by the way, it's not just the anti-Semitic incidents. We've seen heightened acts of hate crimes committed against Asian Americans, certainly after the COVID crisis befell the country. Post-George Floyd, the acts of racism are way up. Anti-immigrant and hateful acts of xenophobia have been on the rise since President Trump started talking about the wall and even during the 2016 campaign. So we are living in a moment of tension. And I think you can attribute it to several factors. I think, number one, the polarized political environment has people on edge. I think, number two, the failure of our president and other elected officials to call this out clearly and consistently has emboldened the extremists. I think, number three, social media, with its laissez-faire approach, has allowed these hateful people to connect and coordinate their activities like we've never seen. And then finally, we're in this moment of great tension and difficulty. And with the COVID crisis and the economic recession, it creates an environment where government can't seem to deliver. And in those moments in history, as you said, we have parallels. When government can't solve our problems, people start looking for scapegoats. People look for someone to blame. And throughout modern history, it's in places like the Middle East and Europe, it's been the Jews. So whether they're marching with torches in Charlottesville, right, or taking to Parler and Discord last night, blaming the Jews is the stock and trade of bigots and extremists. But I think ultimately the only way we come through this, Vlad and Anne-Marie, is if we all come together. And we need to say loudly, and we need to say, our elected leaders and ordinary people, that again, this kind of anti-Semitism, racism, and hate has no place in our public discourse, and we will reject the politicians and the public figures who traffic in such prejudice, period.
Jonathan Greenblatt, I should also note to our audience that in our discussion, you are rightfully bringing up the plight of others, not just Jews in this country, but people who are the targets because of the color of their skin, because of their gender. In fact, it is part of the mission of the ADL to advocate for all people in this country. It has been the mission of the ADL since 1913, the right to participate fully in all aspects of American life, for the right for people to vote regardless of the color of their skin. So thank you for including those marginalized groups in your comments as well. Thank you very much, Jonathan. We appreciate it as always.
Thank you.